Good morning. I'm Greg Capella, the Deputy for NTIS, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you today about our informational session for a joint venture partnership with us for data innovation. Joining us on stage today are our panelists who will be helping field questions later on in today's discussion. Please hold your questions until then. Going from your left to your right, Shyam Sundar, who is the Chief Science Advisor to the Deputy Secretary and the Chairman of the Oversight Board for NTIS. Avi Bender, my new boss, please be gentle, and the prior CTO of the Census Bureau, and then Henry Wixon, who is the Chief Counsel for NIST as well as NTIS. Avi will be presenting next an overview of NTIS organization, its mission, what it means to be a joint venture partner, and what we'd like to jointly accomplish with you. After that, we'll be having a Q&A session where we welcome your questions. For those of you on the webcast, you can use the link in the upper right of your screen. I believe you'll see a link in blue that shows opportunity announcement at ntis.gov. This is the same email address as in our Federal Register notice. For those of us in the audience, we ask that you ask one question only, please, at first, and one follow-up, so we can allow ourselves kind of a broad spectrum of questions. But as we go forward, we will be also weaving in the webcast questions. So the team down here will be fielding them, forwarding them on to me, and I'll weave those in as we go on through the session today. For the people here in the audience, there are two people with microphones, Laura and Troy. If you get to stand up, please. When you are ready to ask a question, please just raise your hand. I'll recognize you. They'll come down and give you a mic so you can be heard online and better heard in this own building. And just a few administrative comments. First is that if there was an issue and we need to evacuate the room, please come down to the lower level, not the upper, come down, go out through the doors in the far corner. The doors out here are blocked, and unless you are able to ride a CAT tractor, you probably don't want to go out those doors. They're doing a lot of constructions. Also, the restrooms are located here on the right, behind me in the corridor, and we ask, like in the movie theaters, turn off your ringers for your personal devices, just to be considerate to one another. With that said, I'd like to welcome Avi to give his presentation.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everyone, for being here in the auditorium, and for those of you who woke up pretty early on the West Coast to participate in the webcast. We've got a really interesting setup in this auditorium. In front of me, for the real data geeks, we have a mosh pit set up, so if you really want to get into that during the presentation. I'm only kidding. All right, so let me start this discussion by asking a real basic question. Companies like Uber, Waze, Netflix, Airbnb, LinkedIn, Zillow, what do they have in common when you really think about that? Is the technology that they have, is there something really unique there? I think these companies have created a highly disruptive and innovative business model. And it is a very data-centric business model. They have basically been able to reimagine, rethink how to deliver new products and services to the marketplace, things that really need that. And they've really increased the value proposition through these capabilities. What's really important to think about as we go through the theme of the discussion today is the capabilities that they have been able to deliver. And there are many other companies, I'm just using them as examples. But really, what's important is the business model. So that is my quick intro to why are we here today? What are we trying to do? And I hope to shed some light and color on the Federal Register notice. It's kind of boring the way it's structured, so let me give you some more detail. You're here because we're actually, in a way, selling to you We want you to join us in this new industry-government partnership to transform data into insights and actions. You hear lots of talk in industry about, industry and government. We've got to figure out ways to work together, to really collaborate, to, promote innovation. Lots of talk. We also have ongoing codathons and hackathons and grand challenges. Really very important activities to further energize industry-government relationships and delivering products and services. But we also want to create a sustainable business model. We want you to benefit from new opportunities through timely conversations with federal customers. Conversations. Amazing things happen when you can actually sit in front of someone and have a conversation and not simply interact through bureaucratic government documents. And most importantly, we want to find a way to really collect our passion, collaboration, innovation, and ultimately the end game are really our citizens, taxpayers, supported by federal agencies, and we want to provide unique public services. So this joint venture is really unique in the federal government because it's really truly about a new way of how we engage between industry and government. As I mentioned, there are lots of initiatives within the federal government to deliver products and services. And the codathons and the hackathons that I mentioned, and open data and commercial data and other types of data, those are really important for energizing innovation across communities around the country. But there also has to be a sustainable, repeatable, scalable approach to continue to infuse that type of collaboration and innovation in the marketplace, and a JV is one of the approach. The JV will provide a faster time to market and value as JV partners, and I'll get into that. You will have access working with NTIS and federal customers, an opportunity to innovate. And over time, NTIS, working with its JVPs, will become a focal point of expertise for federal-wide data products and services. The reason for the Federal Register notice is that we want to find a way to really identify the best and the brightest and structure almost like a boutique of uniquely qualified organizations. And I'm talking about commercial, industry, not-for-profit, for-profit, research, academia, organizations that really bring an important value proposition to the table, both individually and in combination with other companies. We wanted to make it easier to engage and get things done. And over time, you will see us expanding into what I would call non-traditional market segments, where we may have partners that you would typically find in media and entertainment industry. Clearly, we're moving to Internet of Things, electronics, healthcare, safety, and so forth. Now, I've started with kind of a lofty vision of all the great things that may be possible here. I want to now ground that very specifically within the existing mission and the nature and scope of what NTIS does. So our mission, and I'll just read this real quick, is to provide innovative data services to federal agencies through the joint venture partnerships with the private sector, and the private sector is all-encompassing, as I mentioned, to advance federal data priorities and promote economic growth and enable operational excellence both within agencies and external to the agencies. Everything here is about not just a joint venture, but an opportunity to create joint value, value that matters, value that has a business outcome and impact. The scope will include providing innovations in the use of federal data, either alone or in combination with other data sets, federal open data, commercial data, and so forth, providing more efficient and effective ways of sharing this information, and then introducing new ways to analyze and interpret this information. The biggest issues that our customers, federal agencies, have is they collect, they process, they disseminate data, but then both within the agencies and then the external customers have great difficulties in their ability to analyze, consume, discover, access, interoperate, mash up, and then ultimately move from data to insights to decisions. We want to find innovative ways to really make an impact there. And looking at various technologies and techniques to gain greater insights from the data that's produced in the marketplace. Now, ultimately what we're trying to do here is we're thinking big. This is a joint venture. This is not individual fragmented contracts for delivery of very discrete services that individual agencies may have. That's something totally different. We want to encourage competition through collaboration. That's a new paradigm. What that means is that working together between the JV partners across multiple market segments with federal agencies who will be funding many of these initiatives, using federal, state, local data, private commercial data, we believe that we can create very innovative new products and services to serve the public, and really do that by tackling the complexity of the genetic code of the data that exists today, and that is really about, as I mentioned, the discovery, the access, the analysis, and the predictability of the data. Now here is think of it as maybe kind of a high-level consulting side, but it's really very important, because this is how we want to really think about scaling the value proposition of data to empower a nation of innovators. If you look at the continuous spectrum of data, we're creating products and services along this path. Descriptive data basically talks about data that is created today, and the Census Bureau and HUD and EPA and others basically collect data, such as the American Community Survey being one example, and it describes our nation's people and economy. We then need to continuously move up the value chain to be able to diagnose this information and ask lots of why questions. Because once we do that, we'll be able to further predict and then ultimately prescribe various products and services to gain the types of insights that we need. So we're moving to the right to really increase the value proposition. As you look at this particular slide, you should be thinking, okay, what are my skill sets? Where can I provide the value proposition? How can I work with academia, research, other companies to actually offer things that we believe are unique and very transformative? So the way this joint venture authority is basically working, and a lot of that is in the Federal Register notice, is that NTIS will use its JV authority to provide the data services for speedy execution of innovative projects. The beauty of the JV partnerships, once we have that set up, it's set up today, but once we continue to add new and innovative partners, will provide us with really this unique set of portfolio type companies that will be working with NTIS and the JVPs. NTIS will be providing a value proposition. I'm going to tell you right up front, if you're thinking that this is a contract vehicle, if this is some kind of a pass-through, you're probably in the wrong building. This is really about building a joint value proposition, leveraging the skill sets that the Department of Commerce has. We have exceptional talent in the whole data field. As you know, the data pillar is one of the biggest foundational pieces for commerce. We have the skill sets. We have access to other experts within the government who can really help formulate the problem statement before we jump to a solution with what you see on the right there, and that's the federal agency. The federal agency's role is really to provide the mission, the problem statement, the context, the funding, and we will be working very closely with them to deliver unique solutions. Now, there may be some confusion here in terms of, well, what exactly are we delivering at the end? Well, I can't tell you the specific. I will go through some use cases, but I want to illustrate the attributes of what is really unique about the JVP, and I would refer you back to the examples that I used before. First, an early use of emerging technology. It's got to be something unique here. This is not about, I have a mission-enabling service, I need 3 people to do such and such. For that, get a contract. There has to be a complex solution architecture, and we have to have some interoperability issues. We just can't find ways to mash up these data sets because of lack of standards. Agile application development and system operation, which require adaptive scoping. What does that mean exactly? It means that sometimes we don't know what we don't know. You cannot reimagine and rethink a potential product and then put that into a statement of work with a CLIN. There's got to be a different approach here, and the JVP provides an interesting framework for how to basically deal with uncertainty and risk. And again, custom solutions to meet unique requirements without commercial off-the-shelf solutions. If something is available off the shelf and can easily be configured to solve a very discrete problem, go the route of a contract vehicle, not the JVP. The customer, as I mentioned, is a federal agency with the appropriated funds that will engage NTIS. And NTIS can have data services also through some collection of user fees. We operate in a revolving fund. We're self-sustaining. We have no appropriate funds. If business does not come in, we're out of business. So that's why this is a very unique model in the federal government. We are incentivized to solve problems with you, right? So that's really key. Let's talk about the rules of engagement, about becoming partners. This is going to be a merit selection process. It's not a typical competitive process. Merit selection means that the Federal Register identified a number of criteria, and you may meet some of that or all of that. But it's really, do you have the necessary capabilities to deliver this type of data-centric work? So it's very much merit-based. Eligibility is for all organizations, as I mentioned, industry, commercial, for-profit, not-for-profit, research, academia. You're all invited to submit proposals and tell us about your unique qualification. We're operating under some pretty strict statutory authority. We have to follow all relevant laws. We're not going to circumvent the federal acquisition regulation, the FAR. No upfront payments. And in the event that there's some financial incentives for some unique deals, we will have to notify Congress in advance. Now, let me get into some specifics of what do these deals actually look like. So for example, you know, there are agencies, bureaus like the Census Bureau and many other agencies that have a traditional approach of doing surveys. They collect, they process, and they disseminate information. Much of the data collection today is still based on engaging with citizens directly. But what if we could come up with new insights on the GDP and consumer price index, not by asking individuals what they're spending their money on, but by simply tapping into information from credit card companies, if we can do that, looking at sales receipts, looking at what's called administrative data. Administrative data is data that comes out of Social Security, the IRS, Census, and many other agencies. So maybe there are what I would call big data analytic opportunities to see what's in the marketplace today and actually, you know, get something done and create new capabilities to derive insights from economic, demographic, and social data. Really important. Now, what is that going to entail? It entails skills and capabilities within the joint venture partners to be able to design, test, analyze, and demonstrate applications that actually can do that. It's really leveraging your private sector knowledge of how that in fact can be done. It's helping create potentially new suites of products that haven't even been imagined, of combining data from Social Security, from Census, from EPA, from HUD, and so forth, to derive new insights. And then ultimately deal with those sticky issues that I mentioned that really are fundamental to the genetic code of data analytics, and that's the ability to discover, access, and make sense of all this data. Use case number 2, promoting smart city initiatives. And for that, there's an opportunity here to really combine what I would call contextual information with the real-time sensor. And again, what I'll tell you are these are just sort of notional examples, but we really leave it up to you, working with the federal agencies that are involved in smart city initiatives, to come up with new innovations. Public safety, emergency response, creating a secure national data grid, expanding 311, combining contextual data from census and sensor data, real-time sensor data, to get a bigger and a more comprehensive picture of the crumbling infrastructure in some cities and in some bridges, to understand in real time what in fact is happening, and then to quickly identify remediation actions. Now, you could do that through challenges, you could do that through codathons, but if you're looking to build a business, like the companies that I mentioned earlier, you've got to come up with an operating model, sustainable operating model that will continue to generate value through this ecosystem. So that's just one example. Let's talk about use case number 3, providing federal agencies with capabilities for a common open data analytics platform, software infrastructure cloud type services. I always ask the question, and someone mentioned this to me not too long ago, why can't we do in common that which is commonly done? Why do federal agencies have to continuously tackle these highly generic individual problems themselves, when in fact that if we can somehow have a tighter alignment with industry and government, we can put our brains together and come up with a common approach to assist agencies in tackling the issues of data discovery, consumption, analytics, visualization, so that they can focus less on the infrastructure and more on helping the public make timely decisions. That was use case number 3. There are many other use cases that I haven't actually personally thought about because I don't know. This is where you come in. So these are just some of the examples. So we have a very aggressive schedule. The FRN was published, I think, either June 20th or the 15th. I may be corrected on that. Today we're having the information session both here at the Commerce Auditorium, and we may have over 60 or so people across the United States. And for those on the West Coast, I appreciate you waking up at 6 this morning. Proposals are due on August the 1st. We will make the selection of the joint venture partners probably by the end of September. It really depends on the volume that we get in. We will do our best to make that happen. There is also a White House Open Data Summit. I don't have this on the slide, but I believe there's a White House Open Data Summit late September, and we intend to play a role in there to further launch this particular effort and potentially our existing JV partners at the time. Once we make that happen, we got to roll up our sleeves. We'll be meeting with federal agencies. We continue to meet with federal agencies, actually, and begin to really think through about the innovative projects that are possible and begin to get some things done. I'm suggesting that maybe semi-annual, twice a year, we assemble all of our JV partners and potential customers to have meetings on the East and West Coast to really talk about lessons learned, what have we actually accomplished, and then what can be done further. Over time, I may be corrected, but I think the JV agreement is potentially for a period of 3 years once you're selected, but we will be looking to continuously refresh the partners, and some of those partners may already be aligned with you. This is a pretty exciting opportunity. there's a reason. I really had a great time personally at the, as a Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Census Bureau, the first CTO there. And as some of you may know, we did some pretty innovative work on things such as the City SDK, our API, really leveraging the wonderful data that came out of the American Community Survey. I had to pause really before joining NTIS because the work there was really interesting. But when I personally found out about this opportunity and the joint venture status, I thought, my God, what an incredible opportunity. So, you know, all this talk about industry and government working together, let's do it. We can make this happen. So I'm thrilled that you're here. I'm thrilled for the people that are listening in on the West Coast and Midwest and all over the country. And just, you know, can't wait to roll up our sleeves and get something done. I'll be back a little bit later on, but I just wanted to finish with my opening remarks, and thank you.
We will now open up for a question and answer period. We already have some questions coming in from our folks on the webcast. However, in the audience, please, in the back left.
Thank you. Good morning. Juan Salazar with MarkLogic. Folks, my question, understanding that there's going to be various market segments that we're targeting, do you currently find or do you expect that these data consumers can be a quantifiable specific community, meaning that they'll come back for repeat business? Or do you think that this will be, the consumers will be more of a one-time transaction for each data product that you have, if that makes sense?
As I mentioned in the ecosystem type slide, I think this will be a repeatable type effort. Data consumers and data producers will continue to interact through a number of different business models that will be set up. One example could be around smart city initiatives, where there may be a need for a repeatable approach. I'm just throwing this out, to place sensors in pipes, sensors in bridges, and to continuously monitor infrastructure and safety. I see that as being repeatable. Creating platforms to analyze, discover, and make use of the data, these are all type of repeatable processes. The end game here in each one of these use cases is a creation of a new business model. There will be some opportunity for companies to have this unique time to market and participating in that. But these individual models will continue to evolve, and collaboration will be the new form of competition. So that's kind of the way we view it today.
So just to add to that, historically, NTIS has significant repeat business. Roughly 70% of the business they do is repeat business. So completely in alignment with what Avi said, we're trying to build a whole new ecosystem around the data space, and we expect that as these efforts get started, that ecosystem will also have a lot of repeat business. So that's the historical approach and go-forward approach as well.
Okay. Right next, and then we'll come back over here.
Hi. Good morning. Thank you for presenting. My name is Sunil Porter. I am from Ventec Solutions. My question is two-part. First, how are you going to measure success? And second, isn't your charter very similar to what 18F is trying to do in its establishment?
Okay. We will measure success by the direct outcome of the products and solutions that we will be providing to federal agencies, and they will be, frankly, the judge of that success, and that will be done through a number of metrics that will be set up in terms of what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Is this something similar to 18F, USDS, and a number of other initiatives? The similarities are in that these organizations are looking to infuse innovation into government, so there are definitely similarities there. We will not be competing with USDS and 18F, And in fact, the Department of Commerce has a CDO and a Commerce Data Service. We view many of these companies as partners. We're actually working for the same big data company. It's called the U.S. federal government. And we will work very closely with many of these entities, each offering a unique value proposition. In the case of 18F USDS, they have a very strong professional services arm of developers and agile methodologies. We're not looking to then replicate, we're looking to better leverage and work with them on many of these opportunities.
So we've had a number of conversations with all of these entities, and there is a strong recognition that NTIS is going to focus on data, not IT services broadly. And the main focus of the data mission, as Avi mentioned, is to help support federal data priorities, which includes things like open data and open access. It also advances operational excellence and actually delivers better public service through transactional data services. And so there are a number of areas that we will focus on at NTIS that will be very unique to the kinds of efforts that this core capability will be applied. And what NTIS brings to the table, which no other agency really has, is the joint venture authority. It is a unique authority that is given to NTIS by Congress, and it allows us to really go after leading edge, innovative, agile ways of operating and collaborating with the private sector. So I think that is really the real edge that we bring. And this is really why organizations like 18F, which now is going to be called under the broader umbrella of Technology Transformation Service, or GSA, and USDS are interested in partnering with us.
Let me also give you my interpretation of, because you hear lots of buzzwords, operational excellence. What does that mean exactly? I think we need to look at it from two perspectives. I've seen in my work with federal agencies that internal operational excellence looks at improving internal efficiencies and effectiveness so that the agency can do a better job. So that's one area. And then another area is set up and say, well, we don't do that. We are actually focusing externally on the marketplace. We really have to drive external innovation. And that's really our focus. But you know what? We need to take a look at this in a very different way. Internal operational efficiency and effectiveness is what enable external innovation. So if you look, for example, at a document that came out not too long ago, this thing called OMB 1313, that looks at the life cycle of data throughout the agencies and how data should be captured, processed, disseminated. That is not separate from innovation. To the extent that you can get your act together internally on how you manage the data, that contributes to external innovation. Because one of the things that I mentioned in the presentation is we're having lots of issues around data interoperability, analytics, data discovery. That is an outgrowth of poor internal operational effectiveness and efficiency. So as we think about innovating, think about the connection between the internal and the external.
And I think this is a very good question, so I'm going to give you two examples of what we're talking about. One is a past example, and one is probably a potential future example. The United States Citizenship and Immigration Services came to us and to NTIS. And NTIS partnered also with 18F and USDS. And they wanted to completely change the way in which they deliver citizenship and immigration services through their web portal system, automated systems. And we helped them and are continue to work with USCIS to help do this. Now, think about it. How does data play into this? The people who apply for those services are providing PII, personally identifiable information. Sometimes other types of confidential information. That information goes into CIS through a secure portal. It then is used to do analytics and to process the application and then to make decisions within the department, and then to communicate the results of that analysis and review to the person who applied. If you think about that, that's a vital service. That particular service that particular portal is among the top 10 in the US government at this time in terms of usage analytics. So that's just an example of what NTIS has done in the past. Going into the future, think about the commerce data. Commerce as an entity that has the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Census Bureau, the Weather Service, and a number of other sources of data. And think about how we release information about our GDP every quarter. That information comes out from the Commerce Department. And if you have read, I'm sure you've observed this, every month there is an update to the estimate for the first quarter, or the second quarter, or the third quarter. Why are those estimates updated? The reason they're updated is as you get more data, you can have more accurate estimates. And that information is used to move markets, to make decisions in the financial sector. And what we're trying to do is, how can we mash data in a much more quicker fashion? How can we combine access data from the Census Bureau and the Economic Analysis, and maybe even the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the government side? And then on the private sector side, what about getting information from credit card companies about the activity in the retail sector? If you combine these sorts of data, maybe we can come up with faster, more accurate estimates of GDP, which will serve our American public. So there are lots of these opportunities on a go-forward basis, as well as what NTIS has done previously.
I believe we had a question in the middle. Okay.
Good morning. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about your business model? Are you looking more to go and commercialize and disseminate various different data sets, or are you looking more to go and build more custom solutions that you would go and market to various government entities?
We're looking to find innovative ways to combine federal data, open data, private sector data, the data that Shyam just mentioned, and to do that in such a way that we address the underlying genetic code of data discovery, access, consumption, visualization, dissemination. So we're open to basically to all possibilities. We're really looking for marketplace creativity as to how best to address some of the outcomes that Shyam just mentioned. So I do believe it's pretty much wide open in terms of how we want to approach this.
That is exactly right. I don't think you want to think about this as simply there's a bunch of passive data sets over here, and we're getting a bunch of companies who will now take this data and just make it public. This is not just a pure open data play. It's about innovative data services that will do some public good. It could create innovative private sector products and services. It can actually help improve the way government functions for the American people. So and I think at some point we're going to have to figure out, and we haven't done this yet, is how do we crowdsource ideas of how government, what better services we can provide by doing these mashups, so then we can go to the agencies, partner with those agencies, and then help partner with our private sector partners to help solve those problems. So I think this is a very exciting to be in this space, because we are thinking very innovatively.
Please, right here.
Morning, my name is Matt Campbell. I'm with Elastic. I'm sure you'll get a lot of great ideas from industry, but I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how the Joint Venture Authority will help you attract clients.
So the clients, the customers, the paying customers are actually federal agencies. We will be working very closely with, for example, chief data officers throughout the various agencies. And because we, NTIS and Commerce and a few other agencies, bring some unique value skills to bear, we will be working closely with these agencies to help formulate and formalize requirements to address the problem set. So because this is a partnership, we're basically working together with the customer to help define the requirements so that we can better apply the JVP resources at hand.
So a couple of additional comments to what Avi suggested. NTIS's 95% of NTIS's revenues come from services it provides to other federal agencies. So I think that's a start. So NTIS does know how to engage private federal agencies and to build those partnerships in a very agile way, in a way that is innovative and so on. What is different about the go-forward strategy is we're taking that ability to focus it on data as opposed to the many other things that NTIS has been doing in the past. So what we're going to do is build on that ability and refocus it on data. The other value proposition is we're going to be building also some in-house data science and engineering capability, partnering also with the Commerce Data Service. But with the partners we are going to be getting from this particular Federal Register notice, the new set of partners with top-notch data science capabilities in different areas, all the way from better using data to how to optimize the sharing of data to doing analytics on it and also deep understanding. It's all of that, all the way to the most sophisticated technologies with regard to artificial intelligence, machine learning, cognitive analytics. We want to have that ability through our partnership with the private sector so that we can actually be the go-to place for data in the federal government.
I will add one other clarification, and if I'm off base, you'll correct me, okay?
I promise.
All right. So I've been involved in the private sector before, and I've also worked for a number of federal agencies. Where I basically struggled in the first couple of months is I always hear from different parts, you know something, Avi? You don't really understand our business, right? So many companies that may perceive of having really unique value proposition, and if these Fed officials could only figure out what we're trying to tell them, then they will get it. So the advantage that you have as part of a JV partnership is really working with us to work with these federal clients so that together we can better understand the requirements that they have and actually, in a way, help communicate those requirements, because federal agencies are business silos, right? We have these issues. Communication is a big deal. People need to understand why. What's the business outcome? Why is this important for us? How does this help our mission? Is this just another big data widget that you're trying to sell me here? I don't have time for that. So the value of the NTIS partnership with its JV partners is to really improve a go-to-market approach to communicate value proposition.
I believe
No
gentlemen,
clarifications required.
we'll take one more from this audience, then we'll weave in some questions that are from online. Okay. And then we'll come back.
So we've used terms like innovative and creative and kind of a preference for not commercial off the shelf. But we have about 3.5 weeks to develop fully fleshed out proposals to address these issues. Obviously, the goals are wonderfully valuable. Is there a concern that with the short time frame that you will either have a small series of fully fleshed out proposals or a
Right.
large number of shorter proposals, and will there be an iterative quality to this?
Right. So the thing is, as you respond to this request, don't feel pressured or obligated to come up with the unique world-class solution that's going to somehow solve all world data problems, because it's going to be very difficult to do that. The reason that I opened my remarks with the examples of some of these high-tech companies was really to illustrate the fact that capabilities is what it is that we're looking for. Illustrate to us not an end game product per se, but illustrate to us the capabilities that your organization has individually or in partnerships with others to really innovate and to be creative. Based on that genetic code, we will be able to, over time, come up with a DNA for new solutions.
And that really it's the two-part process. That's really the guts of NTIS. The proposals that we're looking for now will get to establishment of organizations as JV partners. So there'll be an agreement with the folks who are selected through this merit-based process to become joint venture partners. It's a partnership agreement. It's not a project agreement. There's a second phase once there are a set of companies that we have with a certain set of capabilities who have become NTIS partners. Then the projects that federal agencies want, we will be in a, we already talked to those agencies, but we'll also be in a better position to match the types of problems that federal agencies want to have solved with the capabilities NTIS has and its partners have. So there will be a letter agreement for each project on which those partners might work. So keep in mind what we're selecting, as Ivy just said, in this process is really the capabilities, your technical capabilities and your business capabilities. And there are some examples, as Ivy said, we'd like from you as to what you've actually done. But we don't want you to boil the ocean and explain every federal problem you could solve with your capabilities.
And we try to be not overly prescriptive, because if we could be like very, very prescriptive and tell you exactly what it is that we're looking for, then do a contract.
From our webcast audience, I have some questions I'd like to ask you. First, how many JVPs do you expect to select through this process?
I don't know. I think it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be 30. Again, this is a merit-based process, so as we look at the capabilities and the unique qualifications that you have according to the criteria of the Federal Register notice, we may find out that, wow, we really have a suite of some very innovative companies, and so we will pick companies based on merit. But I cannot give you a specific number. It can range anywhere from who knows, 5 to 30 or maybe even more.
The second question, if I may, is does NTIS already have a team of incumbent JV partners?
Yes, NTIS already has in place existing JV partners, and maybe Sham, you can assist in kind of characterizing who they are, what they do, and.
Yeah, so they do a lot of different things, and because the statutory mission that NTIS has historically had is very broad. It talks about scientific, technical, engineering, and business information, and that really opens the door for almost anything under the sun. A lot of their projects have focused on e-learning and management, and knowledge management, but I would say it's less. There are roughly 40 companies who are currently partners. But the most important thing is as we reposition NTIS, and it truly is repositioning. We've had extensive conversations with our oversight committees on the Hill and within the department. So the repositioning of NTIS as a data agency really is focused on trying to get a set of new partners. And some of the existing partners are free to apply to this new process. But at the end of the day, the set of partners that are selected from this process and future processes that might unfold a year from now, 2 years from now, will be the partners in the long term. the partners who are in place right now, those agreements will be terminated, and they have been informed several times over the past year. Those agreements will be terminated when the projects they are working on have ended, the current projects they're working on have ended, and to their logical conclusion, as well as these new partners on board, and we're talking about new projects associated with this new mission.
So I'll just add that the existing joint venture partners can be seen at the NTIS website where there's a listing.
Last question for this round from the webcast audience. Will awards be evenly spread between industry, nonprofits, and academia?
The awards will be distributed based on a merit-based process. We clearly would like to have a good mix, but again, we have to look at the qualification, and it'll be a merit approach.
Yeah, I think you should look at in this area, the Federal Register notice, in fact, is pretty decent in how it's characterized it. We have asked for capabilities in innovative capabilities in 4 broad areas. We definitely want to cover that spectrum, so that is something we'll be looking at. Again, merit-based is really, each proposal has to stand on its own and be meritoriously qualify under the criteria that's there, the technical plan, the business plan, the logic and the soundness, the technical merit, so on. But once you do that, then we also want to make sure we're covering the areas of interest that we are interested in. And that includes, we want to have teaming arrangements. We actually say we encourage teaming arrangements in the Federal Register notice so that small and medium-sized enterprises and startups are as much a part of the proposals so that we can get access to this new capabilities some of these leading-edge companies can provide. And I'm not saying that large companies don't have leading-edge capabilities, but we want to be able to access them. We also talk about, in the proposal, in the Federal Register notice, requesting how you would deal with, if there's a project that happens like 6 months from now, and you have a missing capability that you'd like to propose a project for, how would you go about getting those missing capabilities? And so we'd love to hear your thoughts through your proposals on how that would happen.
Okay, returning to our audience. Over here, please.
Good morning. We talk about partnerships. Can you guys share with us what we can expect as a partner from NTIS?
One of the key benefits, and I think I may have covered that in the slides, is the beginning of conversations with federal agencies. Through these conversations, we will be able to get greater clarification about problem statement and requirements across the board. And it's really the opportunity to sit around the table with federal agencies and really discuss and understand the value proposition. And because you're also, as a member of this JVP, frankly, you have a most favored nation status by virtue of the fact that you brought to bear these unique skills and capabilities. So an audience, and then an opportunity to address a specific problem set in a much shorter period of time than a traditional method.
So, the reason we're both talking is because we both have slightly different perspectives on the same thing. We're in complete agreement. I just want to clarify that. The one is the fact that NTIS is going to be a data service organization. So one of the things is that's its mission. So partnering with NTIS brings you the ability of of an organization that's dedicated to providing service. Its mission is to provide that service, unlike some other federal agencies that have a mission, let's say, in energy or security or whatever it's trying to do. So this is its mission, its raison d'etre.
Right.
So that's one piece. So you're partnering with that type of an agency. Second, you get to work on problems which will provide you unique expertise in high profile and innovative ways to solve really important problems for the public good. That positions your company in a far better situation in terms of its reputation. Not that there are some great companies here, but imagine that you could solve vexing problems in medical care or in infrastructure services delivery to our people. That would be amazing. Third, you actually can leverage those solutions that you create for the federal government in different ways to your other services that you might be providing to the private sector, and vice versa. The federal government benefits from the services you're providing to the private sector through this kind of collaboration. And I think the most important thing that Abhi mentioned is the fact that this organization works in a highly flexible, interactive, and collaborative manner. I wanted to make sure I put all those three words into that sentence, but that is very unusual in the general federal landscape.
Carl Walenskas with I3 Solutions. Based upon your experience with the agencies and that you've been doing this for a while, how would you envision a typical engagement to sort of play itself out? We're talking about innovative things here and first-time things. Do you see sort of this early stage, a pilot type of activity going on, and then with a full-scale production type thing later, say for a technical solution? Or I'm just curious if, based upon your experience, what your thoughts are on that.
I would say one potential scenario would be to work with chief data officers within these agencies who I believe need assistance in really introducing many of these new innovative technologies. The feds also need assistance in communicating and selling concepts internally. It's not just about the technology. So we view projects as an opportunity to engage with chief data officers and the what I call the CXO within the agencies, even up to the DepSec level, to really begin to formulate problem statements, and then using that to begin a process of either pilots, full-fledged projects, things of that nature. That would be just one example.
So I think this is, I'm going to hit on a particular point which has to do with, you said, what happens, is it pilots, and then what happens when you get into production? Well, the answer is we haven't used the word pilots for a very good reason. We are focused on projects that are going to have innovation at their core, okay? Innovation. And when we had actually a meeting a year ago with the joint venture partners, we said, why do you like working with NTIS? Standard response from most of them was, you guys, we get to work with you guys on innovative projects. So I think that is at the core, and that is also the core for which we want to use the joint venture authority. If the joint venture authority is something separate and special and not the classical contract federal acquisition regulations approach. So we want to be very judicious in the use of that authority. So a project might go for a few years, and as long as it's innovative, high degree of innovation, and we have criteria in the slides and in the federal register notice how we assess that. As long as that is met, it's appropriate to use the joint venture authority. If it starts to transition into what I'm going to call maintenance and operations, routine stuff, then we have to start thinking about, as Avi said, contracts. is this something that the federal agency can then transition off into a contract, into standard operating procedures that they do? Or is there really a rationale for NTIS to stay engaged in that project? And if so, how does that work? And what's the NTI? We don't want NTIS to be a contracting agency. We will never let that happen. So there has to be a value add that NTIS can provide in those projects.
Right. That's a good point. Another example would be, and I've sold to agencies, and I've also been a buyer of services. I was never really too excited about buying something where I'm going to be the first one and really to absorb that risk. Well, many of these innovative projects are risky. So part of the opportunity to work through this JVP is to essentially try new things that initially are risky, but eventually could in fact turn into products and services that could find their way into the marketplace through contracts.
Over you.
Yeah, good morning. Could you please talk about the investments that NTIS is making in itself for the JV program?
There are several areas that NTIS does. One is it's the organization that is going to engage with the federal agencies. So there's separate interagency agreements between NTIS and the federal agencies that are associated with the projects that NTIS does. So engaging the investments that NTIS makes in a great deal is the slew of program managers that they have who are engaging with the federal agencies to build these new opportunities that NTIS and its partners can work on. So that's a dedicated investment. Secondly, we're building internal data science and engineering well, Avi and Greg are building the internal data science capabilities. I'm so invested in NTIS, I sometimes forget I don't work within NTIS, but we're building this data science and engineering capability in-house so that we can, and also partner with the Commerce Data Service. So we can actually, as we go to engage the federal agencies, we can actually help them convince them that there are some unique solutions and problems for which they can work with NTIS to partner. We are a credible partner in the data space. But also then, if we can crowdsource with our JV partner, the private sector partners, about the types of problems we can work on, that gives us even more ammunition to market the projects and problems that agencies might be interested in. So those are the types of investments NTIS does. There's also what we're going to call a program management function that NTIS is going to have to do to provide the stewardship and governance of this precious authority that it's got, which is called the Joint Venture Authority.
The other point here is that, I mean, realistically, you may be selling to an account that has a very specific problem, and from your perspective, you may think, well, okay, listen, I know what the deal is. It's probably more of a contract. I'm just going to go this route. I don't really have to look at other avenues. The value proposition that NTIS has, by virtue of the fact that the skill sets that we have to bring to bear, and that we have a really good holistic perspective on where other federal agencies are going and how to scale the opportunity from a discrete delivery of a product or project to something that can really be a much, I think, larger opportunity, and then therefore expose other federal agencies by virtue of our knowledge, what we bring to the table, about similar opportunities. So you may be selling to one, we have really great visibility into 10.
Do you hear me? Oh, there. My name is Jonathan Barney from LAC Group. I have a couple of pair-related questions. One, as it pertains to the ongoing financing of the project, as funds start coming in, does the NTIS reinvest into the continued development of the information products? how does that profit sharing kind of work, or is that something that is determined at the level of the JV or the letter of agreement? And then after NTIS ceases to support this product, you step away from it, it becomes a contract vehicle or something similar. What happens then to the ownership of the information products that were developed under the JV?
I will take a crack, and I will also turn it to Henry Vixen, who is the chief counsel and will keep us legally straight. The classic approach that NTIS has used is that, there would be some kind of an agreement. The partnership agreement will kind of establish terms of how the cost of doing business is shared between the private sector partner and the federal government, in this case NTIS. And then if the project, there might be different ranges. There might be a project in which the private sector partner does 90% of the work and NTIS does 10%. There might be a project in which NTIS does 30% of the work and the private sector does 70%. You get the point, right? So that those numbers change. But you have a general understanding at the partnership agreement level. Then when you have a specific project that you execute, it'll depend on the specifics of that project, how the different costs of doing business are shared. Now, we don't generally use the word profit, and although I know everyone in this room from the private sector works for profit, as a government entity, we often talk of cost of doing business, which is how we would talk about it. There are other words we use, but I think you get the point. But there is clearly investment of expertise. There's joint planning of the projects. There's joint investment of resources. That means people, capabilities, equipment, and then there is the joint execution of projects. That will all depend on the particular project. And the rules of the road in that regard are really the legal agreements between the two organizations.
I think that's absolutely right. And with respect to intellectual property, if I think you were getting at that perhaps a little bit with your question, typically under the joint venture agreements that NTIS enters into, it does not seek to get any rights to intellectual property that you're developing in the course of solving a problem for a given agency. And it's on that basis then, as Avi was mentioning earlier, that once that innovation process has proceeded successfully, then you can take the results of that, the insights and the new opportunities and services that you have, and take that on and use it for other customers in other settings. That's our goal here, having solved that problem. So we're not typically going to be asking to take that kind of information on a case-by-case basis with respect to a particular project. If a federal agency has a particular need, then that will be worked out on a one-off basis.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Diana. I'm with the Richard R. Fay Foundation, not-for-profit. I was just curious if you could speak a little bit more to the scope of the joint venture authority and how that plays into, specifically how that will weight your the merit basis, the merits that you're judging these proposals on. For instance, are you more interested in the business proposition or the data, the value of the data that's going to be brought to the table, or the innovation? How you are going to consider those with respect to the joint venture authority that you have?
The statutory authority usually just actually says pretty much, NTIS has authority to do joint venture partnerships, and it has authority to use other transactions, cooperative agreements, and so on, right? So the joint venture authority is a flexible authority, and the rules of the road, to some degree, the stewardship and governance of that authority are a vital part of the NTIS decision making, which is where we have a very, very close collaboration, NTIS, with the Chief Counsel's office, because that's how we develop the rules of the road. Now, in the past, the joint venture authority has been used for a broad range of activities in what I call the scientific, technical, engineering, business information, pretty much everything under the sun. We have now narrowed the scope of that to focus on the new data focus. Why have we picked the new data focus? That is a 21st century national need. That is a departmental priority in its strategic plan. The strategic plan actually talks about Commerce as America's data agency with organizations like Census and the Weather Service and BEA. And NIST, which provides cybersecurity guidance for the IT world. So we have the right set of people to do this within the department. So that is the first piece of it. So that determines us in terms of the scope of the JV. We have chosen, after a lot of deliberation and discussion internally and also with our oversight committees, to focus the use of this unique authority on innovation and agile projects, not for things for which commercial solutions are readily available. So the merit criteria that you see in the Federal Register are geared to that type of approach.
Let me weave in a couple questions from our audience. If you are selected as a joint venture partner, are these services still permitted to be offered to commercial enterprises?
Can you repeat the question?
If you're selected as a joint venture partner, can these services still be offered to a commercial audience?
Well, there's
yes. So we're not seeking to bind you up altogether here. We're seeking talent, basically, innovation and expertise through this opportunity announcement. And we expect that the companies that will submit proposals will be active in the marketplace. We're looking to take advantage of your ability to innovate, to provide services and solutions to problems that federal agencies have, as to which there are not present solutions. If you are offering services to the public or private sector commercially, we expect that to be the case, and we certainly are not going to be in a position to suggest that you shouldn't be able to do that. And as I said in response to an earlier question, solutions and innovations that are developed in the course of a joint venture partnership project will then be available for your use, typically abstracted, to apply in other contexts commercially in the course of your business.
There may be a sentence in the Federal Register notice, I vaguely remember, where it might have said, if you're working on a project or something along those lines with NTIS, then which is serving a particular federal agency, you don't again go and provide that same service to that federal agency that's conflicting with what you do. So there might be some things there, but that's just common sense. I'm sure there's nothing special. It doesn't prevent you from running your business, which is why we would be one place to partner with to solve federal problems.
Another webcast question was, how can you describe the process for selecting joint venture partners?
I think we have that in the Federal Register notice. So I would read that pretty carefully. Look at the criteria, and again, as I mentioned before, focus on it's a merit-based process, and focus on the capabilities that you bring to the venture.
Part two of that was, how will we select a partner for a project?
So keep in mind, I think I answered that question before, because, but I'll repeat it. Part one is becoming a partner and having an agreement with NTIS, what is called a partnership agreement. And if you look at this, if you look at the plan, the proposal itself is supposed to have a technical plan which provides your capabilities and the people, the people who will be working on those projects and what their expertise is, examples of past work you've done, but also a business plan as to how you will engage with NTIS and what are your teaming arrangements and that sort of stuff. So that is written in the Federal Register, and then a selection will be made using the criteria in the Federal Register, which is also there pretty clearly. It's fairly standard type of criteria. So there'll be at least 3 reviewers who will review each proposal, and those will be available to the selecting official. In this case, the selecting official will be Greg Capella, the Deputy Director of NTIS, and before he makes his ultimate selection, he will consult with the Director of NTIS, that is Avi Bender, and he will consult with the Oversight Board, of which I'm chair. But that's a consultation process, and the whole purpose of that is to make sure we have the right set of capabilities to balance our needs, but they have to meet the basic merit requirements. So that's part one. That will lead to a selection decision followed by an agreement that has to be reached between our legal team at NTIS, led by Henry's office and your companies. So that's part one. Part two is once you have an agreement in place, you are then eligible to apply for project opportunities. And what we will do is, again, use a merit-based process. This is not a sole source opportunity. Just keep that in mind. We're not going to be doing, okay, now we got a project, we got 30 people here, we like company X, so we're going to give all our projects to company X. That is not the way it's going to work. It's going to be, again, a merit-based process. For each project, there will be criteria, what type of skills they're looking for that project. Based on the need of the agency, and then you'll have an opportunity, those 10, 20, 30, whatever the number of companies are selected, will be able to propose for that project. Now, where are those ideas coming from? As I said, idea generation can happen many different ways. It can come from NTIS, it can come from the agencies, but there could be a crowdsourcing opportunity where you folks suggest those ideas to NTIS. What we don't want to have happen, I can assure you that will not be seen to be good, is you talk to the federal agency and then have them send the money through NTIs. That is not going to happen going in the future.
Right, so that's really a key point. Again, you're in the business of driving sales targets, business opportunities. So you come across an opportunity with an agency that you already have a relationship with. And maybe for that agency, the best approach is to actually execute on the contract. And why go through this JVP? Because if I go through this JVP, then the capabilities that my agency has could actually be now exposed to other members of the JVP, and I actually may lose the business. That's a reality. But also the reality here is that if you are selected as a member of this JVP, you've been selected because of a merit system, and there may actually be opportunities, as I mentioned before, in terms of time to market, opportunity to actually compete through collaboration with other organizations, and ultimately deliver what is in the best interest of the federal agency customer. And that is a top-notch solution. So these are key decisions that you will have to make. But we believe, because of our relationship with the federal agencies and our consultative approach to come up with really the best requirements, over time, it's actually an advantageous approach.
As we're in our last 10 minutes, I'm going to ask one more question from our webcast audience, and that's an easy one. Will the proposals be published publicly? Will they publish the proposals?
The proposals that the private companies submit to NTIS will not be published or posted on the website, but they will be treated consistent with all federal rules so that the reviewers can read it, assess it, and we can have discussions internally to make the decisions. So, and when that partnership agreement is signed with the companies that are selected, that proposal will be made part of that agreement. So that is the classical way. And of course, if there's a Federal Information Act request, I will let Henry deal with those type of issues. They'll be on a case-by-case basis. That typically doesn't tend to happen, but if it does, I'm sure there'll be.
So in the event of a FOIA request for that kind of information, we would defer to the proposer, the owner of the information, and if they felt that they included information that was proprietary or involved trade secrets, then we would withhold it on that basis. And we typically have in the past, in the very few instances where it has come up.
By the way, I do want to, sorry for chiming in, there is one topic that hasn't come up so far, and I wanted to get that discussed before we get to the closing part here. That is one of the federal priorities in the data space is what is called open access. And open access relates back to a policy that is in place to make scientific publications and the data that support those scientific publications openly available to the world. This is a topic area that is a 21st century version of one of the classical areas that NTIS has worked in the past. Clearly, all of the federal agencies that are scientific agencies are developing their own plans and their own dissemination strategies. The question that is often there is, what are innovative ways of dealing with that? I think this is an area where universities, particularly when it comes to data, they are struggling to find, and I think there are people who have signed up for this meeting who are from research performing service organizations, universities, as well as others who are in the open access business. I think that is still, if there are innovative proposals, we certainly welcome those, so we can look at them as to, how best to position NTIS in that space.
As we enter in our last 5 minutes of the program, any more questions from our audience local? Oh, back there. And then down here.
Yeah, just a quick question. So the ideal engagement for the JV partnership, are we really talking about a professional services engagement only? Because in many instances, part of our solution could entail a new product that the given customer agency does not have. And if you're introducing a new product, you're talking about licensing and so on and so forth. So I just want to get the clarity, are we talking about a professional services engagement only?
It will be both. There has to be there'll probably be a professional services component and the product component. Professional services will be opportunities to look at, again, new business models to further refine the requirements, create operating plans. So I think it's really very important. Looking at the SWOT, strength, weaknesses of a particular organization to see where the opportunities exist. Answer is yes, both.
And then right here.
Hi, it's Binay Krobot with IBM. I think you mentioned earlier that you are in the process of building or developing your own internal data science engineering capability. Can you talk a little bit more about the timing and scale of that capability?
That is happening as we speak. We already have a few data scientists on board. We're going to be looking at innovative ways to really scale our business operations. I don't think it's feasible for us to continuously hire dozens or hundreds of people as we build this organization. It's going to be done through this collaboration process with lots of other really smart individuals who work around the federal government to create this collective team. So we'll have a baseline of staff at NTIS. We'll be working with the Commerce Data Group. We'll be working with individuals scattered throughout the Commerce bureaus and the chief data officers across federal agencies. And we've already started to have some preliminary discussions with many of the smart folks at OSTP. And some of that will come into greater clarity at the end of September.
Just to give you a sense, a couple of comments worth noting. I think Avi probably mentioned this at the beginning. NTIS does not receive federal appropriations directly. It's an entirely self-supporting agency. So it's just like you have a business to run and a bottom line to meet. There's no profit here, but they have to be self-sufficient. So just keep that in mind. So they're in the process of developing a business plan for this new mission that Avi is leading that effort. And so we expect this will be developed over the next several months in parallel with how we're doing this piece. And what is the most interesting piece of this whole transformation of NTIS is we now have career leadership in place at this agency. Avi is director of the agency, who brings a data background from his role at Census. Greg Capella is an information technology expert. Both of these folks have worked in the private sector. Greg was at the Department of Homeland Security heading up their enterprise systems effort. In fact, a startup that they started there, Greg was one of two people who helped start up that effort. So we have really two super duper leadership folks in place to take this agency into the future.
Okay, last question from the audience. Please.
If data innovation allows capabilities in the federal government based on research and development from different sectors, for example, DHS, since you come from there, DOD, and HHS, would you guys be interested in research and development capabilities that can enhance the federal mission capabilities through data innovation, but would require research and development in the initial stages?
Yes. I think that's part of the target audience here, that we're looking to academia and research institutions, and over time finding ways to really create innovation facilities or tap into these innovation facilities both within the government and in the universities to really continue to promote this.
Okay. Gentlemen of the panel, would you like to have any closing comments?
Sure.
So, and there may be some questions out there that we don't totally have the answers for yet, but we're going to figure this out together. At the beginning of this talk, I just ran through some examples of companies that I personally view as very innovative because of the business models that they've created. We are looking for innovative products and services to come out of this, but I'm also asking you on behalf of NTIS to really rethink and reimagine together under this JV process and create really new innovative products and services. And many of those may not exist today. So let's really think out of the box. I also don't want us to be constrained by the status quo. The status quo includes limiting our thinking based on what you may be perceiving the constraints of the way the federal government operates. I really want you to think creatively as you make your proposals, and the channel for doing that is to talk about your capabilities that you believe have not been tapped into yet. The bottom line is we really look forward to getting your qualification statement proposals by the 1st of August. You know, the success of this JVP hinges on you in the audience, JV partners. Without that, we don't have the JVP. So we're selling to you today. We're really hoping to receive your enthusiastic input. Share this information with your colleagues. Really looking forward to working with you. And thank you really for all of us for taking the time and meeting with us today, both here in the auditorium and for all you wonderful people on the webcast on the West Coast that had to wake up particularly early for this. Thank you.
Just a reminder, we did webcast this. We are going to post that on our website, ntis.gov, and we'll have question and answers posted there. Our target is Monday. So please, we welcome questions. We still have the same email address for other questions, and we try to answer those quickly. Thank you.